They said my father's house belonged to Isabella. I only got the mirror from his study. Everyone laughed until I found what was hiding behind it. My name is Emily Hart. I'm 34 years old and I work as an accountant, the kind of woman who keeps everything balanced. Except her family. Numbers made sense to me. People never did. Rain lashes against black umbrellas at the gravesite. I stand alone while my sister Isabella greets guests like a queen at her coronation. My mother clings to her arm, not mine. Their grief looks polished, mine looks forgotten. When the lawyer reads the will, the mansion, our childhood home, goes to Isabella. Me? I get a sentimental item, her father's mirror. The crowd whispers, "A mirror?" That's cruel. I don't cry. I just nod. He never gave without meaning, I whisper. That night, I set the mirror against the wall of my tiny apartment. The frame feels too heavy for something meant to reflect. The carving, initials, and faint scratches look deliberate. When the light hits just right, something flashes at the edge, a metallic line buried behind the glass. Maybe I didn't lose everything. Maybe I just haven't found it yet. Behind that mirror was more than glass. It was the truth my family buried with him. If you've ever been underestimated, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your reflection might just hold your revenge. Some inherit money, others inherit silence. The conference room smelled like polished oak and old perfume, the kind of place where decisions outlive people. I sat at the far end of the table, hands clasped too tightly in my lap, while the lawyer adjusted his glasses and unfolded the pages of my father's will. Across from me, Isabella looked radiant in black silk, her makeup flawless, her grief rehearsed. Cameras flashed through the tinted glass as she dabbed at her eyes for effect. Mom sat beside her, whispering comfort, like Isabella was the only one who'd lost someone. The lawyer's voice broke the silence. To my eldest daughter, Isabella Hart, I leave the family mansion, all business shares and primary estate holdings. A soft murmur rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled. My throat tightened, but I stayed still. Accountants are trained to hide reactions. Then he turned the page. To my younger daughter, Emily Hart, I lifted my gaze. I leave a sentimental item, my study mirror. Laughter. Actual laughter. Someone near the back tried to muffle it, but it slipped out anyway. Isabella didn't even hide her smirk. A mirror. That was my inheritance. My heart thudded, but I forced a polite smile. Thank you, I managed, the word tasting like chalk. I refused to let them see how it burned. When the meeting ended, Isabella stood in front of the cameras, giving statements about honoring Dad's legacy. Mom hovered beside her like an ornament. I stood in the hallway alone, holding a single envelope with the words, property transfer, mirror, study, stamped in bold. The estate manager tried to avoid my eyes as he handed it to me. Your father requested it be delivered personally, he said quietly. I nodded. Thank you. The cameras moved past me like I didn't exist. Isabella's laughter echoed down the marble hall, sharp and cruel. I turned to leave, and that's when Michael Grant, my father's lawyer and oldest friend, stopped me near the elevator. His voice was low, careful. Emily, your father was a precise man. He didn't believe in meaningless gifts. I frowned. A mirror seems pretty meaningless, Michael. He studied me for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then maybe you haven't looked close enough. Before I could ask what he meant, the elevator doors slid shut between us. As I rode down alone, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. Tired eyes, a cracked smile. A woman holding nothing, and maybe everything. As everyone left, Michael's words echoed in my mind. Your father left you more than you think. Objects remember things people forget. I placed the mirror against the wall of my small apartment, the same mirror that used to hang in my father's study, beside his collection of vintage maps and untouched cigars. For years, I'd seen him polish it with a soft cloth, humming under his breath, as if it were something sacred. Now it stood in my living room, surrounded by cheap furniture and peeling paint. Its frame was carved from dark cedar, smooth in some places, splintered in others. When I ran my fingers over it, a familiar scent rose, cedar and faint traces of Dad's cologne, the same one he wore every morning before work. For a moment, I almost forgot the will, the humiliation, the flashes of Isabella's laughter. Almost. But then something strange caught my eye. Under the dim lamplight, a faint line shimmered across the wood. I leaned closer. It wasn't a crack. It was a deliberate, shallow, but readable scratch. It said, "Look deeper." My stomach tightened. Dad wasn't poetic. He was practical, disciplined, and logical. The kind of man who labeled his storage boxes in alphabetical order. He wouldn't carve something like that for no reason. I traced the letters again, feeling the weight of them. Look deeper. Was it a message? A riddle? Or maybe just the desperate imagination of a daughter clinging to hope that her father hadn't forgotten her? I took a step back and studied the mirror in full. Beneath the reflection, the glass had a faint distortion, like a thin haze running across the bottom edge. I crouched, touching the border. My fingers brushed against something metallic. A screw, small, rusted, nearly invisible. I moved to the other corner. Another one, hidden perfectly within the carved frame. My pulse quickened. Mirrors weren't built like this. Not home decor ones anyway. I remembered the way Michael had looked at me after reading the hesitation in his voice. He didn't believe in meaningless gifts. I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, hands trembling. The first screw creaked loose with effort, the sound echoing through the quiet apartment like a secret being pried open. The second one turned easily, almost too easily. And then, as the last screw fell into my palm, I heard it. A soft metallic click from behind the glass. She freezes, heart pounding. Behind the mirror, something shifts, like metal sliding against metal. It wasn't reflection, it was protection. The mirror came off the wall with a slow, reluctant groan like it had been holding its breath for years. Behind it, dust clung to the wallpaper in the perfect outline of its frame. And in the center, sunk into the plaster, was something I never expected to see in a family heirloom. A safe, small, square, and industrial gray. The kind you'd find in an office, not a home. I knelt in front of it, brushing away flakes of old paint. My fingers traced the cold edges, and a tiny light flickered on the digital keypad. It wasn't dead, it was active. "Dad," I whispered, "what were you hiding?" The keypad blinked once, a single green pulse, as if acknowledging me. I tried the obvious. My birthday, error, his, error, Isabella's, error. A low beep followed each attempt, steady and calm, but the tension in my chest grew louder. I sat back on the floor, heart hammering. My reflection in the discarded mirror stared back, pale, anxious, and determined. I grabbed my phone, opening the only photo I had of Dad's study, his desk, his books, that mirror on the wall. I zoomed in, scanning for any pattern, any code. Then I noticed it, a frame in the background with an engraved plaque. His company's founding year. I typed the number slowly. The safe beeped and then stopped. The screen went blank. "Come on," I muttered. "Please." Then a faint whir. The mechanism clicked but didn't open. A power lock. It needed something more. Maybe a passcard. Maybe fingerprint access. Something only he had. I slumped back, exhausted, staring at the silent box that now seemed to mock me. That's when my phone rang. The name flashed on screen, Michael Grant. I hesitated before answering. "Michael." His tone was sharp, urgent. "Emily, are you at home?" I frowned. "Yeah, why?" There was a pause. I could hear papers rustling, distant voices behind him. "Listen carefully. Someone just tried to access your father's office computer remotely. His old files are password protected, but the system flagged it as a break-in attempt." A cold wave ran through me. Who would even know those files exist? "That's the problem," he said. "Only family and the board members knew. And I'm guessing it's not the board." My gaze drifted back to the safe, to the glowing keypad now pulsing faintly again. "Michael," I whispered, "what if they're not just after the files?" "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard. "What if they're after what's inside this wall?" Michael's voice turned low. "Lock your doors, Emily. Don't tell anyone what you found, especially not your sister." My sister didn't need proof. She needed control. The mansion looked different now. Brighter, louder, like even the walls knew they belonged to Isabella. She'd repainted everything in white and gold, as if grief came with a color palette. The portraits of our father that once lined the hallway were gone. In their place hung glossy photos of her. Magazine covers, charity galas, stage smiles. I stood on the marble steps, clutching a gift bag I didn't mean. Inside was a bottle of wine she didn't deserve. When she opened the door, her perfume hit first. Expensive, overwhelming, and wrong. "Emily," she said sweetly, lips curving just enough to show she'd practiced in a mirror. "This is a surprise. I came to congratulate you," I said, forcing a smile. "Dad would have wanted us to stay close." Her eyes glittered. "Would he?" She led me into the living room, the same one where we used to play hide and seek, now stripped of everything that felt human. Her designer heels clicked across the floor like punctuation marks. I noticed the office door was half open. "You kept Dad's study," I said softly. "For now," she replied, pouring herself champagne. "Some things are worth keeping. Others, not so much." She didn't offer me a glass. Of course, she didn't. While she turned to take a call, I slipped toward the study, pretending to admire the renovations. Inside, the air was cool, the faint scent of leather and paper still clinging beneath her new candles. The desk was new, but the filing cabinet wasn't. The same brass handle, the same faint scratch near the lock. My fingers hesitated before pulling it open. "Heart Estate, version B." I froze, a file labeled in her handwriting, not Dad's. My pulse quickened as I flipped it open just enough to glimpse the first page. Alternate financial transfers, different signatures, and a date from 1 week before his death. "Looking for something?" Her voice sliced through the quiet. I turned slowly. Isabella stood in the doorway, phone in one hand, glass in the other, watching me like a cat with a trapped mouse. I forced a nervous laugh. "Just memories. I didn't think you'd still have Dad's papers." "Oh, I keep everything," she said. "It's part of running things now." "You wouldn't understand." Her tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp, testing me. I closed the drawer, my palms sweating. She stepped closer, smile too perfect. "Still chasing ghosts, Em?" she murmured. For a second, I thought I saw fear flicker behind her confidence, like she knew what I'd found behind that mirror. Emily forces a smile. "Maybe," she says quietly. "But sometimes ghosts don't stay buried. Every safe has a story. Every code has a name." I couldn't sleep that night. The city hummed outside my window, restless and alive, while my thoughts kept circling the same numbers, dates, birthdays, anniversaries. Every number that had ever mattered to my father. Then, one memory floated up like a spark in the dark. Dad's office calendar. He used to tap it with his pen every year on April 23rd, the day he founded Hart Engineering. "Oh, 423, he'd say proudly. "The day I stopped working for others." I sat up, heart pounding. Maybe that was it. I grabbed my phone's flashlight, went to the mirror, and knelt before the hidden safe again. The keypad's faint glow reflected in the dust like a heartbeat. My fingers trembled as I typed it I-0. 4, 2, 3, beep, pause, then a low click. It opened. For a moment I just stared, too stunned to move. Inside, carefully stacked, were documents, folders, and sealed envelopes wrapped with a dark red ribbon. The smell of old paper hit me, that same cedar scent again. I pulled out the first file, bank transfers. Dozens of them. Money shifted between accounts I didn't recognize, and one recurring name, Isabella Hart. My breath caught. He'd been moving money quietly before he died. Why? Then another folder. Will drafts versions A and B. My father had written 2 versions. The one Isabella used at the funeral must have been version B. I remembered the file in her drawer, labeled in the same way. This wasn't a coincidence. I reached for the last envelope at the bottom. My hands shook as I turned it over, handwritten, sealed in wax. My name across the front in his familiar, steady handwriting. For Emily, when the world believes you've lost. I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the air itself wanted to keep the secret inside the paper. My father had known. Somehow he'd known this would happen, that Isabella would take everything, that the world would side with her. I ran my thumb across the edge of the seal, hesitating to open it. A part of me was terrified, not of what it said, but of what it might change forever. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Michael. "Michael, we need to meet. I found something in your father's email backups. It matches your sister's handwriting." Emily stares at the letter in her hand and whispers, "Dad, what did you leave me to find?" My father didn't trust the living, only the truth. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. The sound was small, but it felt thunderous like the final breath of a man who still refused to be silenced. Inside was a single folded document, yellowed around the edges, the ink faintly smudged but unmistakable. The first line made my heart stop. Last will of Gregory Hart, version A. I read each word slowly, my pulse echoing in my ears. To my daughter Isabella, I leave my blessing and support. A pause. My stomach tightened. To my daughter Emily, I leave controlling interest in Hart Engineering and full rights to the Hart estate, including the family residence. I sat frozen, staring at my own name, written in my father's precise handwriting. Every letter felt like a heartbeat coming back from the grave. He had chosen me, not because I was better, but because I was honest. Because I stayed when everyone else left. A wave of emotion hit. Grief, pride, anger, disbelief, all at once. For a moment, I wanted to laugh and cry in the same breath. Then reality sank in. If I revealed this, everything would explode. The company, the mansion, Isabella's empire was built on lies. All of it would crumble in public. The press would swarm. Lawyers would feast. Our family name, my father's name, would become a scandal. But if I stayed silent, she'd keep everything. His legacy would remain twisted, forged, false. I pressed my palm against the paper, closing my eyes. His words echoed in my head. Truth doesn't destroy families, Emily. Lies do. I exhaled shakily, the decision already made. I picked up my phone and dialed Michael. He answered on the second ring. Emily? It's real, I said, my voice steady for the first time. I have the original will. My father left everything to me. He was silent for a moment then. You're sure? Yes, I swallowed. And the signature matches the one in his company contracts. It's verified. Isabella's version is forged. You said you found something in her handwriting, right? I did. Notes from her drafts folder. Same phrasing. Same typos that appear in the fake version. Then that's it, I said. We have proof. Michael hesitated. Emily, if we go public, this won't just take her down. It'll drag the entire Hart name through the mud. I looked at the document again. My father's last truth staring back at me. Then let it, I said quietly. He didn't raise me to protect lies. There was silence on the line. Then finally, Michael said, So what now? Emily's eyes hardened. Now, she said, we're going to court. Blood doesn't mean loyalty, it just stains deeper. The news spread faster than I expected, not the truth, but the rumors. Someone had whispered that I was stirring trouble, that I was bitter about the inheritance. And I didn't need to guess who started it. When I arrived at my mother's house, the door was already open. She stood in the hallway, still in her robe, her eyes red from crying, or maybe from pretending to. Emily, she said softly, voice trembling, please tell me it's not true. I held the document close to my chest. If you mean the real will, then yes. It's true. She flinched, like the words themselves had struck her. Why would you dig all this up? Don't you understand what this could do to us? To the family's reputation? Mom, I said quietly. He was our family too. He trusted us, me, to keep his truth alive. But she shook her head, stepping closer. Your father's gone. The company is stable under Isabella. The world has moved on. If you fight this, you'll destroy everything he built. I stared at her, realizing something I should have seen long ago. She wasn't protecting the family. She was protecting Isabella. She promised to take care of me. My mother whispered, her voice breaking. The mansion? She said I could stay there. Emily, please, just let it go. The words burned. My father's truth traded for comfort and convenience. Let it go? I repeated, my voice shaking. Mom, she forged his will. She stole everything. She lied in his name. Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. It was Isabella, dressed perfectly, sunglasses still on, her confidence sharp enough to cut glass. She stepped inside like she owned the air we breathed. Mom, give us a moment, she said sweetly. Once the door closed, the sweetness vanished. I should have known you'd dig where you didn't belong, she hissed. You think this little discovery will save you? You're pathetic. I have Dad's original will, I said, meeting her gaze. And I'm filing it. Her smile vanished. If you expose this, I'll ruin you. You think anyone will believe you over me? The media, the board, our friends. They'll see what I show them. I stepped closer, my anger steady now, cold instead of loud. You've already ruined me, Isabella. The difference is, I'm not afraid to show the world what you really are. Her jaw tightened, but for the first time I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear. Emily turned to leave, her father's will in hand. You already did, she whispered, closing the door between them like the end of a chapter neither of them could rewrite. Some reflections reveal crimes. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and old air, the kind that carries echoes of too many lies and too few truths. I stood at the plaintiff's table, my palms pressed against the cool surface, the envelope containing my father's will resting beside me. Across the room, Isabella looked untouchable, elegant, poised, rehearsed. Her lawyer, a sharp man in a navy suit, whispered something to her that made her smirk. The judge entered, gavel striking once. Case 417B, Hart versus Hart. The sound of it made my chest tighten. The name we both carried now torn in half. Michael adjusted his tie beside me. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be," I whispered. We began with the evidence, the safe, the documents, and a mirror. I explained everything. How my father left it hidden. How the signature matched every legal record under his name. How the supposed final version Isabella presented at the funeral contained errors only she would make. Michael handed the sealed letter to the judge. "Your Honor, this is Gregory Hart's original will, verified to be written and signed before the fraudulent document surfaced." Isabella's lawyer rose immediately. "Objection. This so-called discovery was made under questionable circumstances. A private residence, no witnesses. A family dispute hardly admissible as fact." He paced, voice sharp and deliberate. "And let's not ignore the suspicious coincidence. The mirror just happened to hide a safe? How convenient." He turned toward me. "Mrs. Hart, perhaps your grief has clouded your memory. People see what they want to see." I didn't flinch. "Then let's see what the truth sees," the courtroom murmured. The judge leaned forward. "Order." Michael stepped closer. "Your Honor, we anticipated this claim. The mirror, the safe, and the paper were all documented and time-stamped, but we're willing to go further." He placed a new folder on the desk. "A handwriting analysis request. If this court agrees, we'll have both wills verified side by side." The judge nodded. "Approved. Send both for forensic evaluation." The silence that followed was unbearable. I could feel Isabella's eyes burning into me from across the room, her confidence beginning to crack around the edges. She leaned forward and whispered something to her lawyer. His expression shifted from control to concern. An hour later, the forensic expert took the stand. His voice was calm, professional. The handwriting, ink consistency, and paper dating are conclusive. He looked directly at the judge. "The will submitted by Ms. Isabella Hart is a forgery. The original belongs to Ms. Emily Hart." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Cameras clicked. Isabella's face drained of color, the kind of silence that money couldn't buy her way out of. The judge's gavel struck again. "Effective immediately, all assets under dispute will be frozen pending final ruling." Emily turned her head, locking eyes with Isabella, her reflection in the courtroom glass showing something new. Justice, finally staring back. Ink doesn't lie, people do. The courtroom erupted the moment the expert's verdict landed. Reporters surged forward like a wave, cameras flashing, microphones rising over the chaos. The judge's gavel struck again and again, but the sound was drowned out by whispers, gasps, and the frenzied hum of breaking news. Across from me, Isabella sat frozen, her polished mask beginning to crack. Her lawyer whispered something urgently, but she didn't hear him. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the evidence before her, her own signature, dissected, exposed, fake. The forensic analyst held up the comparison. The fraudulent signature shows tremor patterns and ink layering typical of tracing. The original will, however, is consistent with Mr. Hart's verified handwriting and pressure profile. The judge nodded. The court acknowledges the authenticity of Exhibit A, the original will of Gregory Hart. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I'd imagined this, the truth laid bare, the lies collapsing under their own weight, but it still felt unreal. My father's name was cleared. My name was restored. But the victory wasn't quiet. Reporters called out questions. "Ms. Hart, did your sister confess? Is it true she forged the will for control of the company? Do you plan to press charges?" Isabella stood suddenly, the scrape of her chair loud in the stunned silence that followed. Her eyes met mine, cold, furious, broken. "You stole my life," she screamed. The courtroom gasped. The judge warned, "Ms. Hart," but she didn't stop. "You were nothing. Always the shadow, the charity case. He loved me. You don't deserve any of this." Her voice echoed off the marble walls, raw and wild, a sound that didn't belong to the elegant woman the world had adored. I took a step forward, my voice calm, steady. "No, Isabella. I didn't steal your life. I looked straight into her eyes, not with anger, but with something heavier. I just reclaimed mine. The silence that followed was absolute. Cameras flashed, immortalizing the moment her fury, my calm, the truth inked forever in public record. As the bailiff approached to escort her out, Isabella turned one last time. "You think you've won?" she spat. Emily watched her go, then whispered to herself, "Winning isn't revenge. It's finally being seen. The walls we build with lies always collapse." 2 weeks later, the mansion didn't look like home anymore. It looked like evidence. The gold-trimmed gates were chained shut, security lights flickering as government seals clung to the front doors. Reporters still lingered by the hedges, hoping for one more glimpse of the Hart sisters. But Isabella was gone, stripped of her fortune, her name, and her audience. I stood at the top of the steps, holding the key the authorities had returned to me, my father's real key, heavy and cold in my palm. For years, I'd dreamed of walking into this house as its rightful heir, but now that I was here, all I could feel was silence. The grand chandelier was dim, covered in dust. The scent of lilies still hung faintly in the air, the same kind Isabella had filled the halls with for her parties. I walked through the marble corridor, my footsteps echoing off the emptiness. Every sound was a ghost. Laughter at dinners I was never invited to, whispers behind closed doors, the click of heels that weren't mine. Now those sounds had nowhere left to hide. I reached the study, my father's study, and ran my hand along the old oak desk. For a second I could almost see him there, pen in hand, working late into the night. He'd built all of this from nothing, and it had nearly been destroyed by the people who shared his blood. "Justice came," I whispered, "but peace still hasn't." The sound of footsteps behind me made me turn. It was Michael, holding a small folder and his usual half-smile that tried to hide too much understanding. "It's over," he said softly. "The accounts are frozen. The assets will transfer to you within the week." I nodded, staring at the portrait of my father above the fireplace, his steady eyes painted in oil and truth. "It doesn't feel like winning," I said quietly. Michael placed a hand on the desk beside me. "That's because you're not the kind of person who enjoys someone else's fall." For a moment, we just stood there in the stillness, the ghosts settling, the house breathing again after years of deceit. Then he looked at me, voice low but firm. "Your father wanted peace, Emily. Will you give it to yourself?" Emily glanced at the mirror still hanging on the far wall, the one that started it all. Her reflection stared back, older, stronger, unbroken. "Maybe," she whispered. "But first I need to forgive what's left. Dead fathers still protect their daughters if they're clever enough to listen." Back in my apartment, the mirror leaned against the wall again. No secrets left behind it, just quiet understanding. But I knew there was one thing I hadn't opened yet. The second envelope from the safe, marked in my father's distinct patient handwriting. I sat on the floor, cross-legged like a child again, the envelope trembling in my hands. I traced my name with my fingertip. Emily Hart. His pen pressure was steady, deliberate, as though he'd written it knowing this moment would one day come. I tore it open gently. Inside, a folded letter waited, its edges yellowed slightly from time. My breath caught as I recognized the curve of his writing. Strong, neat, disciplined, like the man himself. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then I've already left this world behind, but not without leaving you something worth more than money. I've watched you grow in silence, often wondering if you knew how much of my heart belonged to you. You never fought for attention, yet you saw everything. You carried honesty like armor, and I feared the world would punish you for it. I made mistakes, especially in how I tried to protect you. I let others shine while you stayed in the background. I told myself it was for your safety, that keeping you away from the greed of this family would save you. But I see now, distance only taught you loneliness." My throat tightened. I could barely keep reading through the blur in my eyes. "That mirror I gave you was never meant to mock you. It was my test of faith. I wanted to know if you still trusted me when the world told you not to. If you looked deeper, and you did. The safe was never about money, Emily. It was about truth. Because truth, like a mirror, only works when you face it. And now you were always the reflection of my strength." Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. The letter trembled in my hands, the words pulling me back to every quiet moment we'd shared. His calm voice, his patient smile, his faith in me even when I didn't see it myself. I folded the letter back into its envelope and held it to my chest, whispering into the stillness, "I hope I made you proud, Dad." As she looked into the mirror one last time, her reflection seemed to shimmer under the soft light, and for just a second, she swore she heard his voice whisper, "You were never small, Emily. You were my legacy." The mirror never lies, it waited. 6 months later, sunlight poured through the same windows that once watched years of silence, secrets, and pain. The Hart Mansion, my father's house, no longer felt like a battleground. It felt like a memory, healed and alive again. The walls had been repainted a soft cream. The gold had been toned down. I replaced the portraits of power with photographs of people, workers from the company, my father smiling at his first groundbreaking, and one photo of him and me, taken before the world turned complicated. For the first time, the house didn't feel owned. It felt shared. Down the hallway hung the mirror restored, polished, still holding the faint scratch that said, "Look deeper." I hadn't erased it. I couldn't. It was the message that changed everything. My reflection now was different. Not wealthier, not grander, but calmer. I didn't see the woman who was humiliated at a will reading. I saw the woman who found herself behind glass, one truth at a time. The company papers were settled, the estate divided, and as promised, I signed away a portion of it to a foundation, one that helped women rebuild their lives after betrayal and loss. Because I knew what it felt like to be told you were worth less than you are. When the press asked why, I said, because money rebuilds walls, but truth rebuilds people. As for Isabella, she disappeared. No public statements, no press conferences. Her social pages went dark, and her name vanished from society pages. Michael said she might have left the country. Maybe she did. Maybe she couldn't face a world that saw her clearly for the first time. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate was a mirror too, and I'd already spent enough of my life trapped behind reflections of pain. Standing in my father's study, I placed his letter in the drawer of his desk, the one he used to write in late at night. The mirror caught the afternoon sun, scattering light across the walls. For a moment, the whole room glowed, like it was exhaling after holding its breath for years. I touched the frame gently and whispered, "You were right, Dad. Truth really doesn't destroy families. Lies do." Outside, the sound of birds mixed with distant laughter from the workers restoring the garden. Life was moving forward, not perfectly, but honestly. I turned toward the door, ready to leave, then looked back one last time. My reflection smiled back at me. Peaceful, grounded, free. "My sister got the mansion," I said softly, "but I got the truth. Behind that mirror, I found my worth, and for the first time, I believed it. If you've ever been underestimated, subscribe to Your Reflection Matters.